Hello and welcome. In this video I will present and talk about the Adler Special, which was also made pretty much identical at Triumph under the same model name. This typewriter is obviously a standard, meaning it wasn't designed to be portable. It was made to be the best writing tool a machine could be. Unlike portables, that was made as good as they could be while maintaining a size and weight that could mean you could take it with you when you went to work or whatever. Generally speaking, a smaller machine won't be able to assist you with momentum for the type arms to the same degree a larger machine will. Made by Triumph Adler, the machine can be expected to be a top-tier quality. It has, in my eyes, an almost kind of brutalist design in its flat surfaces and simple angles. There's no bulbed or rounding surfaces, although some rounded edges, of course. This particular model could do with some cleaning. There's still some dust here and there on the inside, and some of the metal has some white oxidation on it that could be brushed off. I'm saving this for springtime, when I can work on it outside, however. As a standard, it is made to be a bit simpler to service, but not so much as its slightly bigger siblings. Many standards were made to allow for the carriage to be quite easily removed, and while this machine remains simpler to do so than with your average semi-portable, it still requires a screwdriver and some patience. I won't go into much detail on it here, but the drawband is secured by a screw that you need to get out. Flipping the machine on its back reveals the drawband underneath the carriage that moves along on the backside. You'll notice the screw eyes mentioned underneath the drawband securing the metal clip to the carriage itself. On the other side of the carriage is the rails for the tabulator pins, but also on this little pin right here. On the side of it, there's a screw. So this thing needs to come out in order for it not to stop the carriage from moving all the way to the side. You will also have to use the margin release to make sure that the carriage itself moves past this final point. If you do actually slide the carriage off the rails, you should be also aware that there are ball bearings attached to some retainer plates that will come out when you pull the carriage out. Due to the retainer plates, it shouldn't be an impossible task to get it both on and off without losing the marbles, or not marbles, but the ball bearings. But be careful, because it's easy to lose them and it can be annoying to get them back on. So be prepared for that if you really need to get the carriage off. Out of the factory, this machine had a bottom plate to protect its guts underneath. This plate just pops right off because it isn't secured to anything beyond using some clips. Some of these special machines have lost this plate because it's so simple to take off. So some maybe it fell off, maybe it got damaged, maybe someone took it off and didn't bother to put it back on and then just forgot. But if yours do have this plate, you should be aware that it's just a matter of popping it right off if you want to get a look underneath. As you can see, this machine has quite a bit of white oxidation and will give me quite a bit of work to do when I sort out to get it done. But for now, it's fine. The oxidation doesn't actually do anything bad in terms of function or flow. It's just an aesthetic thing, and I don't really like knowing it's there, so I want to fix it at some point, but I want to save it until springtime, as I've said. The machine works with a tabulator system that can be set using levers, as well as margins. Many machines set both tabulator stops and margin manually by use of fins on the back side of the carriage that you push down and then slide to where you want them. This thing doesn't use that. Underneath the carriage there can be seen a set of rails. Many have seen this type of pins before, and the idea is that whenever you move the carriage along these spots, there's a spot in the middle of the carriage that will define exactly where you are in terms of these pins. So say you're at stop number 70 or something, and you push then the tabulator key, then it will move one of these fins down. This fin will then correspond to the spot that you are currently in. The interesting thing about this machine is that, say you want to set margins, then these things also control margin. Say you're at spot 100 and you want to create a margin point over there. Then you move the carriage to point 100 and then push the lever for margins. This will then push the corresponding pin upwards instead, creating like this point right here. Now, inside the carriage are points that will be looking for points like these, and it will run along, hit it, and then that will define where it cannot even go anymore. Now, on this side, this is the right side of the carriage, but this defines the left stops. Alright, to demonstrate tabulators, let's first move the carriage all the way to the left, and then we can trigger tabulator by pushing the tabulator key, which is this one marked T. And you'll notice we move all the way to the right side because there is no tabulator point set. Also note exactly that the carriage moves controlled all the way until I release this key. It also maintains a controlled roll, so there's a cog or resistance inside that makes sure it doesn't run wild to the side and just flows nicely to the side. Say we want to create tab points, we can move it to point 10, and we at that point then use the lever on the side of the carriage right here to control the tabulator pins. On the up side it's a T, on the bottom side is an M. T is for tabulator, M is for margin. We want to create a tabulator point, so we push it upwards, and we hear a slight click. We can then move it on to point 20, for example, and repeat, and to point 30, and repeat. When we move this back and then use the tabulator, we have found that we have stops at these points, and then finally all the way back. The thing about this machine that is a little bit special is that there is no way that you can say you don't want tabulator point number 20 anymore. There is no way you can just remove that point alone. You can only remove all points at once, which is done with this lever or this key, which has a T on it, followed by the circle and a cross. So pressing this will remove all tabulator stops. Yep. Now the margins, they work the same way, only sort of reverse. Say I put in a piece of paper and I move this to where I want my margin to be. Then I press down the M. I have now created a left margin. I then move on to where I want the last point to be, and I use this again. I have now created a right margin. Notice now that I can no longer move the typewriter past these points. If I want to create a margin that is anywhere in between these spots, I may freely do so. So say I move to 40 and create a new margin point, I have now created a new left margin. So I cannot move past 40. If I wanted to create a point that was more to the left than 20, say 10, I would have to remove all margins completely to start over, using this key with the M and the circle and cross. And we now have no margins. Other features on the typewriter is the color selector, which is just the same as any. Blue is for the upper color, white is for stencil. Notice how the ribbon vibrator does not move. And red is for the lower color, meaning the ribbon vibrator will be lifted even higher up. Another lever on this keyboard is this lever right here on the right side. When I first saw this, I thought it was a touch control, but it's actually spring-loaded. So what this does is that while you're typing away, and say you accidentally create a jam. Now, we've all been here, we've all done that, and our go-to reflex is then to just flip them back down. But that involves moving your hand all the way up here. Now, that doesn't take a lot of time. And this thing has then an unjammer. So notice how now while I pull these, the arms will go down. Now, that doesn't take a whole lot less time, but to me, I found it's not really the time it takes so much as the practicality of it, because it doesn't take more than a pinky finger to pull it back down, and I don't have to move my hands. So while I'm typing away, and then I create a jam, and I can just do that and continue on. It doesn't break my flow nearly as much as if I have to move my hand up and flip it down. Finally, the thing I haven't talked about is this key. And it is the margin release, meaning say you've written all the way until the margin point. Say we have a margin point in any case. And we type on, we reach our margin point, and we can't type any farther. But pressing this will release that point and we can move on. I've been using this typewriter for a little while now, and I have one small gripe that I think is a little bit petty. But the return arm, the angle on this arm, it has a nice shape to it to catch your finger, but the thing is that very often when I was typing and I was in the flow, I would use this arm and I would slip. Say it was there, I was going to move it over, I came here and I just kind of slipped because it's weirdly rounded off in a sort of way. But having said that, that's just like when using any typewriter, you have to get used to its small quirks, and this is a small quirk. So just by remembering that you have to angle your hand, it's fine. That said, the Carriage is also quite heavy on these. It does take a little bit of momentum to actually move it properly. Alright, let's have a look inside. So we can just grab the lid, just pops off, no funny angle or anything. It has some nice felt padding inside to make it not reverberate from when it's being used, which is nice. Apparently this machine was lastly serviced in '78, which is quite a long time ago. Inside the machine, we can see this machine uses the normal DIN spools, which is, well, normal to us Europeans, maybe not so much in America, but most German-made machines would use this kind of spool. It uses a normal forwarding, or it uses a normal reverse system that is not dependent on eyelids, meaning that it will just move these around, and you will notice that when the right spool reaches the end of its ribbon, it will tighten up, switch over, and lock it. Now it has reversed. When I've been using this so far, I have seen some cases where it doesn't work properly. Usually it seems to me then that if the ribbon is not tightly spun on the spool, it won't be able to pull hard enough or subtly enough, and then suddenly this won't really flip over as it should. But mostly it works very well. Additionally, it has a touch lever which is located right out of where you can see it. Fun. It has a touch lever right here. Right now I actually have it on the absolute middle, because this machine is probably the first and only I've seen so far where having it on the extreme heavy side is actually just a little bit too heavy, and having it on the extreme negative side is just a bit too light. So it's interestingly enough that this actually has a span in which I really like. Most machines I have tried that I feel is too heavy with a touch regulator, it will be better, but I still sometimes feel like I could move it all the way to the minus and still feel it should be lighter, or the other way around, of course. Other than that, there's nothing special or magical about this. It's a standard Triumph Adler segment system. It has basket or segment shift, which is a good thing because the carriage is of course substantial and quite heavy, so it would break anyone's finger if we had to do that with carriage shifts. Yeah. Okay, let's do a typing test. Now, the first thing we then of course want to do is add some paper. So we just insert this right here and then move it up. Easy peasy. Now, one thing I really do actually like about this machine that I feel is sort of like a quality sign is that with many machines you lift the paper bale and then insert the paper and then make sure that the paper bale then rests firmly on the paper. This machine, you don't have to lift the paper bale. It just goes right underneath. I love that. Not all machines do that. Very few, in fact. So we move it up. Let's have it aligned. See that we are at the right space. We are. That is fine. And so the first thing we want to do is then make sure that we can set margins that are appropriate for this paper. Now, I want my first margin to be right here. That is the left. I then move it over to the right side and create a right margin. Note that there is a certain point on the carriage where it is defined whether any point you create will be a left margin or right margin, and that point is 60. If you create a margin point on 60, it will be a left margin. If you create a margin point at 61, it will be a right margin. So, we are ready to do a typing test. Some of you might have been familiar with this passage. I've been a fan of this passage for a really long time. This machine is very responsive and nice. The pulley system feeling that I feel is typical for the Triumph Adler standards. It is present, though not as much noticeable as it is on its bigger brothers on like the Matura Super. The keys are a bit small, but they still have a nice like indented shape to it, which allows my fingers to better home in on them. When I started using it, I had for a while a small issue with the function keys on the sides, in that they kind of threw me off. It happened a couple of times, just a couple of times, but I found myself, when reaching for the shift key, accidentally going for the tabulator key or the margin unset key. The space key on this has ever so slightly some dead space before it actually actuates. That's not uncommon, doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, and it could be special for my machine, but it is there. Another thing about the spacebar is that it has a two-step mechanism, meaning pressing it down will make the carriage move slightly to the side, and releasing it will complete the movement. This isn't by accident, because it allows you to push letters in between other letters. Say, for example, you're writing the word risk, but you forget or miss the I, so you end up with RSK. You can then move the carriage back to the R, and let's see if we can push the camera so you can better see. This is about the best zoom I can do with the camera, so please excuse that, but I'll tell you what I'm doing. The R is now at the spot, well, the carriage is now by the R, so if I press and hold the space bar, we have moved half a space. I can then press I to squeeze an I just right in between that spot. Let's see if I can get the camera all the way in. And like there. Risk. This machine has the typeface Adler's, or Triumph's even, Imperial Elite. The fact that it is Elite means that the letter spacing is not as wide as other, would be, for example, the Pica. Because the letter spacing is quite narrow, it does mean that the two-step spacebar won't be as useful, especially if you forget letters that are a little bit wider. Say you want to write the word same, and you forget or miss the M, so you have S-A-M-E, and you want to squeeze the M in between after the A, so you press and hold spacebar and press M. There we go. So you see it's barely legible. It doesn't really help much and it just looks messy. It would be better to just correct your text to begin with. If this was a Pica machine, that might actually work better to do it in that way. But it's an option, so nice to have, I guess. And that's about it for this test and this demonstration. The last thing that remains is to take the paper out, which is done with this lever right here, which is uncharacteristically big for a paper release, but that is what it is. First time I saw the machine, I thought this was a paper injector arm, because that's something you see sometimes on standards, which would be really cool, and I was slightly disappointed to find that it was in fact a paper release instead, but it's cool nonetheless. That was the Adler Special, so that's about it for this time. If you held out all the way until now, let me know what you think about this machine in the comments, and feel free to make requests and suggestions on how I make these videos. I've just started out doing this, and I'm open to ideas on how to make the videos better for everyone. So, have a good one!